I've been bringing underground coverage of the Khalistani movement since last year.
Following the group from Edmonton to Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, Sacramento, Wilmington, New York, Washington, and Auckland, attending more than 25 events worldwide. Not only that, but I've also published intricate revelations about key figures within the movement, such as Dr. Khalistani, a practicing doctor in the US who obtained his medical license from a foreign school that was shut down for selling thousands of medical diplomas. Then there is Santokh Singh Khela, the man previously sentenced to life in Canada for allegedly conspiring to bomb an Air India flight departing from New York in 1986. I've also mapped out their connections across the Canadian government. I would not have been privy to this intricate, critical information if not for the research of former Sikh Bob Ray.
The World Sikh Organization
claimed that they speak on behalf of all the Sikhs in Canada, but I would like to point out they never spoke for me, and I do not support their extremist and terrorist ideologies.
All of this, despite disinformation campaigns labeling me a spy, a mercenary, and someone to be reported to the police, leading to a wave of death threats.
Meanwhile, Indian media has stolen my footage, stripped my branding, and passed it off as their own, discouraging my work.
For a time I stopped, not because of the threats, but because I refused to spend my own money and my supporters' contributions just so massive media corporations abroad can profit themselves. Now that you understand my background and what qualifies me to speak on this subject, let's move forward with the intention of delivering a truthful analysis, not an ideological or political vendetta. The question we now examine: how long will Canada and the US tolerate Khalistani extremist activities before cracking down?
In North America, generally speaking, everyone has the right to assemble and express their opinions, including Khalistanis who seek to separate Punjab from India and establish their own ethno-state, Khalistan, which translates to the land of the pure. The problem lies in the movement's history, which is marred by terrorism, like the Air India bombings that killed 331 people, mostly Canadian citizens, and significant number of children. Tensions escalated recently, following the assassination of secessionist Hardeep Singh Nijjar outside his Gurudwara in Surrey, BC. Canada accused India of carrying out his assassination, while India denies it. The general policing approach toward these protests has been limited to basic crowd control. However, through my coverage, people began calling for stricter enforcement, arguing that Khalistanis are violating multiple Canadian criminal codes. In the United States, people are optimistic that a crackdown is imminent, with the election of Donald Trump and his appointments such as Kash Patel as FBI director and Tulsi Gabbard as director of national intelligence, both of Indian descent and are believed to have an intricate cultural understanding and intelligence insights into the Khalistani movement.
So, let's take a look at what laws Khalistanis may be violating and whether a US crackdown is likely.
In this footage from Edmonton, Khalistani activists from British Columbia traveled all the way to Alberta to confront an Indian diplomat's visit at a hotel.
India will shatter into minimum of 15 pieces.
At the start, a man approached me and asked me about my identity. Once he realized which channel I represented, he hurled insults at me.
Don't touch my camera. Stay away from me. Stay away from me. Don't touch.
He then forcefully pushed my camera and shoved me, threatening me to leave the area. The police pulled him aside and spoke with him, but no charges were laid. Later, the police themselves became the target of threatening behavior. At one point, 2 black SUVs arrived at the scene simultaneously, each stopping at separate entrances, a common decoy tactic.
Sorry, Vibrity, I believe.
The Khalistanis rushed toward one of the SUVs, assuming it carried the Indian diplomat. They were met with resistance from police, leading to a heated scuffle, an intense scene rarely seen in Canada. The group was armed with spears and swords. Certainly they were not there to have a discussion with the Indian diplomat. But despite the chaos and physical altercations, no one was arrested or charged that day. It is illegal to assault or intimidate journalists to force them to leave a public space where they have every right to be. It is also illegal to disobey lawful police orders, such as stand back. About a week later, the group reappeared in Calgary, where the same Indian diplomat had a scheduled meeting with a provincial minister. Once again, swords and spears were commonplace. Local Indians were outraged as they witnessed their national flag being desecrated. The Khalistanis brandished swords, used spears to cut the Indian flag apart. And masked men made throat-slitting gestures. It is illegal to make threatening gestures to intimidate others. It is also illegal to use weapons, such as swords and spears, in a manner intended to intimidate counter-protesters. Additionally, blocking access to a provincial building is not legal in Alberta under the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act, which prohibits obstructing access to government buildings, critical infrastructure, and public facilities. The group also held several rallies in front of the Indian consulate in Vancouver, BC, where they physically and verbally glorified the Sikh martyrs, the bodyguards of India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who assassinated her. They also regularly lynch an effigy of India's current Prime Minister Narendra Modi, tearing off its arms and legs and playing soccer with its severed head. Additionally, they chant "Kill Modi," though they add politics at the end. However, their actions suggest they aren't merely referring to Modi's political ideology, and this propaganda poster with a target on his face reinforces that perception. The group also brings their young children to these rallies, where acts of terrorism are openly glorified.
Okay. He's asking to include the baby in the video.
Okay. Include or not?
Include.
Okay. It is illegal to advocate or promote terrorism, and uttering threats, whether direct or implied, is also a criminal offense. Additionally, public incitement of hatred is a crime if the rhetoric is likely to lead to a breach of the peace, and willfully promoting hatred against an identified group is also prohibited. Exposing minors to violent extremist propaganda could further be deemed corrupting children. And even if these specific laws are not in force or do not apply, such demonstrations clearly violate Canadian social norms, decency, and public sensitivities.
Now that we have a clearer understanding of the organization in question, let's dive deeper into some of the key individuals involved. Here's an important detail. The organization orchestrating all these protests in Canada, Sikhs for Justice, is actually headquartered in the United States.
They also chant "Kill Modi" politics in the US. Here you can see the federal police removing them from a park near the White House because they did not have a permit to demonstrate there. And take a look at that casket. Does it seem like it represents Modi's politics or Modi himself? Let's not forget the previous assassination plans of Indian diplomats visiting US by Khalistani extremists. Additionally, in a past visit by Modi to the US, the police intervened again, this time removing propaganda posters featuring a crosshair on Modi's face.
Gentlemen, I'm giving you fair warning. You're going to be arrested. If the officers get here, you will be arrested. Bring the arrest teams up here, bring the bus up here.
Law enforcement forced the group to relocate to a designated protest site, arrested one individual.
Right, you gotta go. All right, put him in handcuffs. He's gone. Arrest him. Lock them up. That's it. We're done.
and confiscated their wooden flagpoles, citing them as potential weapons, a valid concern considering that in Canada, one of their members was charged with assault with a weapon after using one in an attack. Now, the last person you would expect to be yelling "kill" would be a medical doctor, yet here we have Dr. Bakhshish Singh Sandhu, a practicing doctor in the US, openly chanting such rhetoric. But perhaps that aligns with the standards of the foreign medical university he graduated from, a school that was later shut down for selling thousands of fake medical degrees. Another notable slogan that frequently appears at these demonstrations translates to "Tawinder Singh Parmar's way is ours to guard." Parmar is the prime suspect behind Canada's deadliest terror attack, the Air India bombings. He was the leader of Babar Khalsa, an organization that remains listed as a terrorist group by both Canada and the US. Notably, among the participants in these rallies, individuals have been spotted wearing Babar Khalsa insignia, even in Washington, D.C., literally outside the White House. Now take a look at my discussion with a Sikh reporter at the Kill Modi Politics rally in Washington, D.C., asking if Modi would be safe if he appeared before them.
Spread from his body, and then Khalistani started playing football with his head. If Modi was here, is that what would happen to him?
No.
No, you wouldn't.
No.
They wouldn't lynch him?
Because wherever the things are happening, the law enforcement is responsible for the content or for anything that is happening.
Here's the most concerning aspect of all this. The Ottawa organizer of Sikhs for Justice, the group behind these protests, is a former convicted terrorist, Santokh Singh Khela. He was a member of Babar Khalsa and, while living in Montreal, allegedly conspired to bomb an Air India flight departing from New York in 1986. He was sentenced to life in prison in Canada after being busted by the FBI. And according to his own daughter, he remains a high-ranking member of Babar Khalsa to this day.
Listen! Khela is not a terrorist. India is a terrorist.
However, the Canadian courts overturned the verdict nearly a decade later, and prosecutors eventually dropped the charges. But this raises an important question. Why was Khela tried in Canada at all? When he was caught by the FBI, allegedly conspiring to bomb an Air India flight departing from New York, why was he not extradited and prosecuted in the United States? If he had been tried there, would he be free today? Will the US government extradite him for a new trial?
We are releasing the Air India routes and the flight numbers.
When an individual like Khela is involved in your movement, and when you're publishing videos warning people not to fly on specific Air India flights on certain dates, should we interpret that as a mere call for a boycott, or as an effort to instill fear of another terrorist attack? The RCMP previously launched an investigation into similar rhetoric, but what about the FBI? After all, the General Counsel for Sikhs for Justice is a US citizen too, and the organization itself is based in the United States.
Here is Khela marching at a Nagar Kirtan event in Melton, Ontario, glorifying a suicide bomber who killed Punjab's chief minister, alongside killing and injuring dozens of people. Glorifications of a suicide bomber and a terrorist act is not something common to see in Canada.
With Sikhs for Justice operating from the United States and its leadership and activities potentially violating multiple US federal laws, the question is not whether a crackdown is justified, but whether it will actually happen. In Canada, we rewarded individuals who were interrogated by the RCMP and subjected to polygraphs in relation to the Air India bombing, and yet we elevated their relatives and associates like Harjit Sajjan to positions as ministers and mayors and judges. Can any Sikh politician in Canada rise to parliament without having family ties or alignment with the World Sikh Organization, an organization that was accused of having terrorist ties even before the 1985 bombings?
So hear me out. Who cares about these loud activists drawing all the attention to themselves? The real question is, what are they distracting attention from? In my opinion, a truly meaningful act would be to investigate the World Sikh Organization. This is not something Canada is willing or able to do, but the United States has jurisdiction too.
As the WSO was founded in the US just 1 year before the Air India bombing. It was in the US where Ajaib Singh Bagri publicly pledged to murder 50,000 Hindus. So, how long will Canada and the US tolerate Khalistani extremist activities before cracking down?
Canadian Hindus!
Only time will tell. But according to the US-India joint statement released last week by the White House, a commitment was made to strengthen law enforcement cooperation to take decisive action against elements who threaten public and diplomatic safety and security and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of both nations. Perhaps a US crackdown is imminent compared to a Canadian one.
Producing this type of a report takes years of dedication and takes tens of thousands of dollars to maintain every month. If you appreciate the quality and depth of my work, please consider donating at mediabizergan.com/donate to keep Media Bizergan strong and to keep me going. Thank you.